how this is going to work. But I'll forge a little bit, and then we're going to wander off into my basement shop where my grinding station is set up, and I'll do some grinding, and then come back out and scroll the hooks and things like that. I got a chalkboard in the basement. I'll talk about hook design a little bit. So if anybody has any questions, just ask. Again, this isn't to make up for a 3-day class. It's just a little primer. And so I'll be going kind of fast on some things. You're just going to have to pay attention and re-watch it over and over again if you need to. So for me, I guess I've been pull lathe turning and turning for maybe over 10 years, 12 years now maybe. Forging my own tools for over 20 years. And over the years had various different blacksmith setups. Now where I live, I just have this small shed, and I'm not forging tools that often, so I don't need a major shop. Still on the fence on whether I want to do it that way or not. So I just come out here and forge once in a while when I make hooks for myself, or once or twice a year I offer up 20-some hooks for sale for the pull lathe turning scene. So, what I have here is a nice anvil. It's 150 pounds. Again, you don't need something like this to get started, but if you're going to be forging semi-seriously, you're going to need to get some sort of anvil. And then I use a gas forge these days. But in the past, I've had coal forges and made my own charcoal and used mined coal. But the gas forge is pretty slick. All you need is a propane tank that you'd run a grill on for cooking, outside cooking grill. And that tank will last over a day, maybe 2 days worth of forging. So, you need to spark it up. And the beauty of these things is you can weld in them too, so you can laminate, forge weld laminate different steels together to make some cool tools. I have the main steel I use is 01, which is a type of high carbon steel used for various applications. And 01 is something that you would, it's fairly easy to work compared to some of the other more complex alloy steels, like high-speed steel M2 or something. And when you harden it, you use oil instead of water. I'll get into heat treating a little bit later, but I have these rough hooks that a friend of mine makes for me now. He has a power hammer and a nice grinder, and so we work together figuring out what I need for just a rough hook, and then I take them and then forge them into the custom tools that I make or use. Here's one of the oldest hooks. I probably had this, this might have been 10 years ago. And the beauty of this type of thing is that you can just reforge your tools as you need. And so I'm going to reforge this one. I'm going to taper the end. I'm going to make a couple cuts here and show you guys the process. Or maybe I'll forge on this one, I don't know. Show you guys how to draw, the basic techniques of drawing and hammering and things like that. Can everybody hear okay? No comments?
No comment. Somebody asked if it was cold. Yeah, it's snowing.
35 degrees Fahrenheit.
Yay, Christmas. And I think Magnus is...
Magnus?
Yeah, on.
I got all kinds of bits and bobs out here. Looking for maybe I'll forge this as a rough. Nah.
Greetings from Argentina. Cool.
The other thing you're gonna need is a nice set of tongs. Vice grips kind of work in a pinch, but they're really not gonna work for very long. You could buy a new pair, whatever. You're gonna need one pair, so it's worth it. Nice hammer. So. Huh?
Can this be moved somewhere?
Yeah.
Thanks.
All right, so I'm gonna fire up the forge and we'll see how loud it is. Before I knew I was gonna be doing this, I forged all my new stock down, so I don't have any new stock. So that's why I'm gonna show you guys on some of this older recycled stuff.
Someone's in Brazil.
Wow. Just my breath. Maybe it's. Can everybody hear me?
Somebody asked, you said you make your own charcoal?
I used to make my own charcoal with a retort, if you know what that is.
Joey's on.
Joey! So this takes a little bit to fire up, to warm up, so maybe I should have started it earlier.
How's the weather? Joey asked.
Okay.
It's snowing, Joey.
I just scored some wrought iron plate. So I have a bunch of Japanese tool steel, blue paper steel and white paper steel. So I'm going to make some small plane blades for some of my woodworking. So that's going to be really sweet. Real wrought iron is hard to find these days. They don't make it anymore.
Someone's asking about refractory bricks?
What about to make a forge?
Oh, maybe.
You can do that. I can talk about that in the basement. I have a small jeweler's torch forge that I use just for turning scrolls and micro adjusting. It works. You can do it. It's not going to get really high temperatures, and it's going to cost a lot of money, you know, constantly replacing those small little propane tanks and stuff. It works. I just see we left our hori out there.
Oh, no.
It's going to take a few minutes for this to warm up, so. Magnus says it's snowing in Sweden?
Is that UP iron? Someone asked.
Oh. Is it what?
Someone asked if it was UP iron. That iron, maybe the iron plate that you have?
Oh, I don't know if it is. They produced iron here too, in Ashland. Turn up the pressure.
Talk about the shape of the raw hooks. Someone asked.
The raw hooks? Someone's asking that?
And someone else is asking about if the gas forge is commercially available. Where did you get the forge?
Yes, you can buy the gas forge. You can just search it online. They're easy to get, fairly easy to make as well. there's a whole bunch of stuff on forges. Blacksmithing is its whole world in its own, and pretty accessible. Here in the States, there's blacksmith groups all over the country, and lots of forums and lots of YouTube stuff. Of course, with YouTube, you gotta kind of be careful on what you're paying attention to, but anyway, it's pretty easy to get into. So what we're trying for is something like this. It has to be tapered at the end of one end of the rod that goes into the handle, and then we're going to draw down and taper the tool so that we can grind it and shape the blade before we scroll it into the actual hook. So, you know, this has been drawn out, you know, quite long, and still needs to be more forging. So I might forge this before we go in too, so we can grind on this. But it'll make more sense after we get inside too. It's pretty simple stuff. Hammer on it until it's long and flat and thin.
Let's see. Nick asked a question. In Europe, people are using EN47 spring steel. How does that compare to 01?
I have no idea. You have to go online and look at the conversions, the European codes for steel, and the state codes, and Japanese codes for steel, Russian codes. They're all different. And so the recipe, the metallurgical recipe might be similar to 01. I have no idea. So you'd have to look it up and find out what it is. That's kind of the trouble with some of this. It's an international thing. There's no standard. When I was in Japan this spring, they were working with a certain type of high-speed steel, and I had to find the conversion of it to find what it was in the States. So just dig around on the internet. It's a powerful tool. Just find out the information.
Hands on Deck wants to know why forge at all, why not grind it out?
You could grind it out. It's going to take a long time, and you're going to be pretty limited on the shape you can get. Fairly limited, I'll say. It just, there's limits to what grinders can do. Unless you can freehand grind with an angle grinder, then you have more capabilities of making the shapes required. But you're not, you don't have to hammer. You don't have to hammer or forge, but it's just faster. And if you're going to make a hook like this with this long drawn out, it's very thin and long. To grind that, it's going to take hours to grind on that. Unless you have a custom grinder that's worth thousands of dollars, and if that's the case, you probably have a forge as well. So.
Someone wants to know, where are you based?
Ashland, Wisconsin, on Lake Superior.
Some people from Sweden said hi,
okay,
and Oslo, and some other people, yeah. People from England.
So this stuff is getting hot.
Yeah, you can't see the color.
You can?
Well, you can't, it just doesn't look the same. It looks whiter than it actually is.
Okay.
Anyways.
When I'm looking at
orange.
this, the camera's not picking up what Jasmine's saying. This is kind of a bright orange color. And in blacksmithing, we gauge the temperature at which the metal is by the color the metal is. So on a bright sunny day, if the sun was coming in and washing, it would wash the color out, and I wouldn't be able to see what temperature it is. Because it's tool steel, if I forge at too cold of a temperature, I could crack and put stress in the steel. And so you want to work, each steel has a range at which it likes to be forged, and then if you heat it too much, you'll burn some of the carbon out of it too, but I don't worry about that so much. So I'm just going to straighten some of this stuff out.
never use hearing protection.
Do I? So that's,
Yeah.
yeah, I have them in my pocket.
And how did you start? They asked.
20 years ago, my kids were delivered by a midwife, and the midwife's husband, named Michael Jones, he lives south of here. He's a blacksmith, and so he really turned me on, invited me into his shop. I worked for him for a time, for a little bit of time, and that's what really turned me on to it. And I was into traditional woodworking, and I wanted to make my own tools, and so yeah, my son's 21, so it's 21 years ago.
Aaron Snyder says hi.
Hey, Aaron.
And Owen's on also.
Who?
Owen, Thomas.
Oh, Owen. Hey, Owen. I'm going to cut the ends off of some of these because I need to, tune them up a little bit before I forge them. The trick with this is you can't touch anything with your hands. So you get really good with tongs. Okay, so I have a piece in here that I'm going to draw the end down into a point. And the trick with drawing is that you work the tip first. It's just the way it goes. So I'm going to work this area first. I'm going to tilt it up onto the anvil. It's going to sit like that. And I'm going to hammer like this on this angle. And it makes a pinch, kind of a pinch. And it pulls material out, or material moves this way and it gets pointier. Once I get it pointed, then I lay it down on the anvil and start hammering behind the point. So when you're drawing, making something pointy, so it's a real term used by blacksmiths, drawing, D-R-A-W. I always work the tip down first if you're making something pointy. Then work behind. We're moving the material with a hammer. So you'll see me turning quarter turn and then quarter turn. The anvil acts as a hammer as well as the hammer itself. And I'm on the tip, the edge of the anvil. Don't want to hammer that below a medium red color. You can fracture the steel. This is an old coil spring. I remember when I got this, and it's really hard compared to the 01. I have no idea what it is. in the middle, it's just to straighten it out, because every hammer blow and the heat is on that rod for so long. When you hammer, sometimes it kind of buckles under the hammer blow. So switch this one around. That'll be a good one to draw to show you guys. This one too. And if you're going to do this on your own, don't get overwhelmed by it. It's pretty straightforward stuff. The basic drawing, you can't really mess it up that bad. As long as you pay attention to what you're doing and kind of reverse engineer it. You're making this long point. There's only a couple ways you can do that with a hammer and an anvil. If you hammer too much on one side, you know, that metal gets wider. So you're flipping it. You're constantly flipping it, quarter turn at least, so that it's reducing in cross section. And as it's reducing in cross section, it's going somewhere. It's going toward the heat or the path of least resistance. So the cold bar behind, it's not getting long. It's not getting longer there. It's getting longer in front of. So if you work the tip down and then you work next to it, it gets longer, and as it gets smaller, so you're imagining like clay. We're not reducing any of the mass. We're just moving it around.
Aaron wants to know if the harder spring steel is more difficult to work.
It's harder, yeah. Heavier blows. That particular steel is, 01 is a really good material, but I recycled that, and I don't know what it is. It's impossible to identify, but I noticed the difference between the 01. It's just denser. And if I remember, I just stopped using it because I was having a hard time heat treating it. It was cracking. I was forging it or hardening it at the wrong temperature. I don't know. Okay, so on this next heat, Jasmine, maybe you should come up close.
Yeah. Okay. I didn't want a spark to
You're gonna be okay.
burn me. Oh, rude. Rudy.
Oh, hey, Rudy. All right. So I'm going to work the tip of both of these down back to back. And as you watch, the rods will be up. And I'll be working on an angle. The rod will be on an angle. And the hammer will be on the angle. My hammer is, I'm hammering on the edge of the anvil so the corner of my hammer doesn't hit the anvil. So here I can get a tighter, smaller tip because the hammer head isn't in the way. If I hit this, it can bounce and hit me in the head. Seriously, or you can damage your nice surface. So working the tip, I'm going to do quarter turns. And one of the other things you might notice if you watch blacksmiths, they take a break and they pound and then they set their hammer off to the side for a second and then hammer again. That's a really good way of forging. I've never really got the hang of that so much, so I usually just hammer straight through and I rest once in a while. Some people do it excessively, then you're just wasting time.
Joey wants to know if I have a matching blue onesie.
This is the new uniform, Joey. Wait till you come back.
We're going to get one for you, Joey. Yours is going to be pink, though.
Okay. Come closer, maybe. So I'm working that tip, keeping it square. Then might be really loud on the
It's just
camera.
really hard to see it. It just looks like a light. It's light. Yeah, that helps.
So that's a point, a drawn out point. Good for the end that goes into the tool. I'll do it again.
If you move it around and then when it cools off a bit, then we can see it.
Yeah.
The two cameras don't work. Okay. Yeah, I think we should have this as a uniform. You, me, and Joey in the onesies. I
So-
always wanted one of those.
So this is a kind of a quick demo on drawing. That's what you're going to want to do on both ends of your tools. The end that goes into the handle, and then as you begin to forge down for the tip of the tool, you're going to draw first, and then once it turns into a point, then you begin to hammer and flatten, and you're going to keep it rectangular in cross section.
Mikey Elephant says hi.
Kind of like, this is a little bit more rectangle. I'll do some drawing downstairs. Okay, so now I got this, I'm gonna flatten. So I'm working further back now. Tip is getting too cold, so I want to warm it back up. So I hammered it flat, it got wider, got a little longer, put it on its edge, brought it back down to a uniform width, and then I again flatten again, put it on its edge, narrow it down a little bit. Again, it's getting longer, so it's getting thinner, and you're keeping the width under control the whole time. So you're drawing out. That was not so good. Getting to the shape I want, which is kind of like a pointy butter knife, and I need it a lot thinner.
Messy shed.
Huh?
A messy shed.
Can you see the time on that? You know?
No, I can't. Nick asked what's the ID
downstairs and we'll take a walk down to my basement shop. I'll grind on them, and then if we can, within the hour, we'll come back out and I'll scroll it into the hook. If we run out of time, we're just going to start a new live feed right after this one's done. So if you want to keep watching, just stay tuned and we'll just start another live one right away. We might run out of time before the scrolling. How long-winded I am.
Someone wants to know if there's any chance of burning the steel, leaving it in the forge as you shift between pieces.
With gas forges, you can regulate the temperature very easy. So you're not going to burn the steel. That's when it's sparking and degrading molecularly. I wouldn't say maybe molecularly, but the crystalline structure is destroyed. That's from really high temperature. So with a coal forge or something that you have a lot of air, you can burn and destroy the steel. It looks like a sparkler. So this forge is set up with the gas pressure and the valves. It won't overheat. I can slowly burn the carbon out of this steel if I'm forging too much. So you have to be careful. But again, I'm not worried about that so much as knife makers might.
Basically 2:30, Joey said.
Okay.
Yeah.
So this one's ready. Kind of the normal, kind of standard shape for a medium to large roughing
Put
hook.
it against a dark background. I think that, yeah, then you can see it
There you
better.
go. So you can see this curve here. That's going to be the edge. It's very thin, and we're going to let it cool and then grind the edge, and even grind the shape. And again, depending on what kind of tool you're going to make. So let's go downstairs.
Okay.
We're going to walk through. It's designed for snow.
Just leave it open.
Here's my wood pile without distractions too much. This is all the wood I turn. Big diameter stuff. You can see this. This will be for mostly end grain cups. That one's rotten. That was just part of the deal. But this weather is a little bit depressing. Yesterday it was like 55 degrees and sunny. So here you can see a bunch of hooks that I'm gonna start making soon, and a really cool draw knife too that I'll show pictures of later. So welcome to my shop. If you haven't watched any of my videos before, this is where we do the woodworking, spoon carving and whatnot. And then I have a lathe room in the back over here, and this is also where I have my other lathe. My Japanese lathe, and some of the hooks that I use for Japanese steel turning. Very different from a Western pull lathe hook. I'll show you guys.
Rudy asked if it was half-inch bar.
half-inch round. No, 9/16 or 5/8. Half inch is too small. You're gonna get a flex. It's not gonna work as nice. For major roughing, you know, smaller cuts may be different. So this is the pole lathe, and you know, for those that aren't quite understanding what we're just making a tool that looks like this, wooden handle. So here's a rough, a hook.
Light.
The hook.
Okay.
And when we're turning, you know, the wood we're turning is here, and we're pivoting and cutting this way. So hook tools, unlike gouges, the hook tools allow us to stand in one spot and pump. And then we're able to cut all the cuts we need from one position. Electric lathes with gouges, they don't need to pump, and you can stand wherever you want, and so you can swing the tool and move a lot with your body to make the cuts. So hooks allow pole lathe turners to make these pivot cuts, and that's the same with the Japanese lathe as well. They're cutting on pivot cuts too. The Asian style turning is derived from foot-powered or strap lathes, and so same pivot cuts. Unlike Western electric lathes, they evolved to use gouges a little bit later. Originally, they used hooks. So let's go in the other room where I grind. So this is my simple setup. I got a couple different grinders here that I use. And one of the light bulbs is burnt out, I noticed. Mainly I use an angle grinder. Freehand, I clamp it to the bench, or I sit with it in my feet on the floor, and grind my hooks. So here you can see a bunch of different hooks that I forged, just the same as the one outside. And here you can see some have been sharpened a little bit and ready to scroll. And so that's what I'm going to do next. I'm going to take one of these and I'm going to grind it. Take the one that takes the less time here for you guys. So when I'm turning on the pole lathe, I use maybe 3, 5 different hooks, maybe 6 different hooks. And the beauty with that is once you can forge your own tools, you start to experiment naturally. They start to wear out, you forge more, you try new designs, and eventually you'll find that certain hooks will work better for certain jobs, like cutting the rim or hollowing the core, cutting the foot, finish cuts versus rough cuts. And so after some time you get experience, and then you have an idea of what kind of hook you might want to make. So I'm going to make just what I call a core diving hook. It's generally untapered. Maybe we should go over here. People still watching?
37 on yours and 4 on Wood Spirit.
Okay. So the one that was outside looked like that. That's destined to be the edge. And what we're going to do is we're going to scroll it. Hold on, just one minute. We're going to scroll it into a little hook. So this hook in particular is really good for diving on the core and for finish cuts. And the reason why, it doesn't have this taper in. It's generally like this. There might be a slight little taper here, and that's the edge. And then when I scroll it, I'm going to scroll it so that it's a cone like this. You can see that one has a little bit of an angle to it up here. It's almost flat, but
Can you twist it a little bit?
you won't be able to see the twist that way. But
Okay.
so if we can get a little bit of a cone when you're coming in and cutting on your core. Core cutting is one of the most challenging things with a pole lathe because you're undercutting that wood that's the core. And that core is basically like a small bowl, and you're turning it backward, meaning when you carve the outside of the bowl, you go from base to rim. But when you're cutting on the core, if it's a bowl, you're cutting from rim to base. So the grain is in the wrong orientation, your tool taper is in the wrong orientation, and so you can circumvent that by having a hook that's reverse grind. The grind is up on top, and you can skew on the core, or you can forge a hook that looks like this, and arguably, here's for the pole lathe turners out there, Owen, Aaron, if you can actually scroll a hook that looked like that, it would be even better. So before you scroll it, looks like that. That's going to put you with a taper the opposite way, which is going to help facilitate the cut, a slice or a skew cut. That's complicated. It doesn't last very long because you sharpen it all the way, but my compromise is this one. So that's the type I'll make, and I'll scroll and forge it. But so anyway, that's what we're working on.
Matthew from Tokyo says hi.
Oh, hey, Matt.
And
Hope you're doing
Liam
okay over there.
Liam Culbertson says hi. Yeah.
Liam, I don't know if I remember who Liam is.
Mm.
Okay. So I'm gonna just grind on this. Maybe Jasmine, you want to be over here.
Okay.
So there's my quick and dirty grinder. Here. I think looking for my safety glasses.
They're on your head.
Yeah, they're on my head.
Can you hold this for a minute?
Jasmine's got to put her earmuffs on.
Okay. Thanks.
Okay. Safety glasses, ear protection. Can you make your way over here a little bit? What that can is full of oil too.
I can't hear you.
So, I don't know if you guys can see. Yeah, which one? Prefer this one. Yeah, more.
Still.
It's going to be hard to see, but it's almost to an edge. I don't want to sharpen this all the way to an edge because when you harden it, it can crack. So, even though I don't harden my tools, it's a habit. So it's quite thin about to here.
Maybe, can you put it on the dark background? There we go.
And we got two different cameras here. I prefer the people watching
Yeah,
this one.
I'm going to move the other one in a second so that they can see.
So there you go. You can kind of see
Yeah, okay. And now this one.
for the three people on our
Wood Spirit, handcraft.
Wood Spirit Handcraft Instagram.
People want to know what grinder wheel you're using.
This is an 80 grit. 80 grit.
Okay.
So the other thing I mentioned about forging, this is a nice handmade anvil. It was a giant sledgehammer that, of course, no one is in their right mind is going to swing today. This is back in the olden days when men were giants. Anyway, I cut it in half and I'm making an anvil out of it. So you can see here, that's going to be an anvil. Where I can do light forging down here, and this is also another type of anvil for Japanese hooks to get that nice tight bend. What are we on time?
I don't know. Probably 245, maybe 250.
All right, let's go outside, and I'm going to scroll. I'll scroll this. Scrolling is kind of anticlimactic, so maybe I should grind one more real quick so I can do two, because scrolling is like so fast. So I'll grind one more.
251, they said.
251?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, okay. That was quick. I think we can scroll before the hour's up.
Yeah,
We heard him.
we got 8 minutes.
We can always do a short one after.
Yeah.
So normally when I'm doing this, I'm doing piles at a time, so it's easy enough to go back and forth to the forge out in the shed and then go inside and do the grinding. But with some of the hooks I'm using for the Japanese style turning, I want to make small adjustments right away, so I had that little forging station down in the basement just for tweaking tools. So I'll get them to this point, this rough point, and then I'll do the scrolling in the basement. Like I say, if we run out of time, we'll just fire up a new live feed right away.
Tomby wants to know what the best sludge metal album to listen to while grinding.
I would say there's a cool Swedish band called the Skull Defects. I'd say that's going to be your go-to music, Tom.
I thought Tom liked Tay-Tay.
Yeah, Tay-Tay, of course. Okay, so when I'm scrolling, I'm going to run this over the edge of the anvil. I'm going to hammer down. Actually, I don't have my small hammer. I can do it with a bigger one, but smaller hammer is better. You're going to hammer down and you're going to bend it into a curve. Then you're going to flip it over and then as it's curved like this, and you're going to flip it over and start hammering it in various spots. You might need to tighten it up, so then you hammer like this. Or closing the circle, it's going to do that. And so scrolling is another thing like drawing. Scrolling is a defined process, and there's a technique and a real skill to scrolling. And so if you're going to be making your own books, Aaron, practice on some other like mild steel rod. You know, just forge out some mild steel and then scroll, practice scrolling. You know, it takes, 50, 60 times to start to understand how to get that sweet curve. I learned in the blacksmith shop. I made a bunch of S-hooks. I couldn't scroll. Michael, my old boss, he's like, here's a box of cut nails. 2 boxes, actually. I think I made 200 little S-hooks. And I learned to scroll.
Would you ever use scrolling tongs?
I do have a pair of needle nose pliers that have been ground and shaped into a pair of legit scrolling tongs. But the problem with the scrolling tong is the steel that we're forging or scrolling is so thin. As soon as you apply the scrolling tong, it cools the metal down so fast that you might not get enough heat to actually scroll it. If you preheat the tips maybe a little bit, get longer handles, that could work. But I find that I cool the steel off too fast with the scrolling tong. And again, I'm good with the hammer. I have lots of practice scrolling, so I'm able to make do with a hammer. But you can try it, develop your skill set with these. It's arguably less control, but you can't see what's going on. And you're limited on size. Some of the smallest hooks I use are an 1/8 inch diameter for nesting. And so you couldn't barely even get these in there.
Adrian Lloyd says hi.
Who?
Adrian Lloyd.
Hey, Ed.
Your phone is on 20%.
Okay. That's time. All right. Scrolling, like I said, is sort of anticlimactic. It goes really fast. So I want everybody to pay attention. When I set it out, the blade is going to be pointing this way. I'm going to bend it down, flip it over, and then bend it, hammer it back into a tight. And then wherever I hammer, that finishing core hook, I'm going to hammer over here so that it turns into a cone. And Jasmine, you're going to need to be closer.
Yeah, I'll get closer once you put it on
It
the...
takes a split second and I'm going to be scrolling.
All right. Yes, it's snowing, Adrian.
It should be here. I'm going to do one, then do the other in each step so people can walk forward. Now I got to pay attention to which side is the edge. Actually, the edge is the other way. I'm sorry, I misled you guys. Okay. Okay, that's the first step. Don't hold that one very good. Okay, that's the first step, like that. Now I'm going to lift it up and start hammering it and watching the effects of each hammer blow so I can reposition.
1.5 minutes remaining.
Okay. Back bend.
Okay. 1 minute remaining.
Okay. I think I can get the other one. And then I won't say goodbye. So thanks for watching. We might get cut off here.
Donations.
Yeah, and I got a donate page on the website if you want to throw down a little for the time. I appreciate it, but it's no big deal. Here we go. Okay.
Any temper was the question.
I don't harden or temper 01 because it air hardens. And heat treating is a whole another conversation. Read up on it, understand what it means. Thanks everybody. Hope you're having fun.